What's up, Vince? How you doing, man?
Good, good, good. Just wrapping up my day at work here. Just clocked out, so even better.
Awesome, awesome. Nice to meet you, Glassy, and good to see you. Hope you're having a good day.
Hello, hello. Yes, having a very good day. Nice,
Awesome, man.
nice way to finish up the week.
Absolutely. Yeah, I keep forgetting it's your guys' Friday evening, right? It's our
True.
Saturday morning here. It's about 10
Oh,
a.m.
right. Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I'll just get a few DMs pushed out and push a couple invites, and then we'll crack into it. What have you been up to today, Vince?
Trying to stay out of the heat as much as possible. It's freaking scorching here, bro. Scorching.
Interesting, with the opposite. What part of the world are you in, Glassy? I was sort of assuming you're in the
I'm near
States.
Boston.
Nice, nice.
Boston.
Boston.
Are you born and bred from
I
Boston?
lived
Or?
in I lived in New York for a long time, like 12 years or so. Now I'm a bit south of the city, so I just say Boston because it's the closest landmark. I'm just a little bit south of the city.
Okay. Is it hot up those ways at the moment?
Oh, it has been, but it cooled out. We're just finally getting a little rain, so. But yeah, we've had just really beautiful weather. Can't complain. The last couple of weeks have been like beautiful, sunny beach weather pretty much every day.
Ooh,
Epic,
I'll take that.
epic. Yeah, no, I do appreciate you joining us today, Glassy. I was having a look through the different stuff that you're doing, obviously on in the blockchain with Bitcoin, and as well as your involvement, I think, in the startup lab, which yeah, we've been checking out as well. So really, really keen to get some do some deep diving questions, and then also pick your brains on some of the technical side. But maybe while we're just waiting for people to roll in, I don't know, maybe just give a little bit of background about yourself, man, and then perhaps we'll do the same.
Yeah, sounds good. My background originally is I came up playing music and really interested in film. I went to school for architecture. I worked as an architect in New York City for a few years. That was like I tell people that was the first rug pull. My first big rug pull experience was getting this incredible degree in architecture, and then going to work as an architect and getting a job that they said would be the impossible job. Oh, no one's going to let you design buildings in New York. Nope, I was designing buildings in New York City, but I was also spending like 95% of my time doing zoning analysis and just felt like a bait and switch. Like if I wanted to go to law school, I would. If I wanted to be a lawyer, I would have went to law school, even though all that legal jargon and whatnot has really come to serve me in the longer run. But it was just painful at the time, so I left the firm and I went into fashion, and I was designing and running all kinds of different brands and producing fashion shows and um, working with different product development, developing go-to-market strategies, and just found out I love being in the startup realm in this like startup culture kind of industry. And ended up working with a lot of different startup brands, even well beyond fashion, and worked a lot in the realm of economic development up here in the Northeast. And that's what I was doing essentially before getting into this blockchain space in the last cycle. Earlier than that, I was kind of investigating it from more of like a theoretical standpoint, but around 2020 is when I got started getting interested into NFTs, and we ended up building a massive club on Clubhouse, which was a super popular app in the last cycle, and we onboarded damn near 500,000 people in that like year and a half span, teaching them, running like 10-hour spaces, 15-hour like audio programming and whatnot, and just teaching people what is a blockchain, what is sovereignty, what is a DAO, what is a gas fee, what is an NFT? What are all these different kind of purposes, and how can this actually land in people's lives? And yeah, and so that was it. And I've just got kind of like hook, line, and sinker, like stuck in this space, for better or for worse. It's kind of like the madness of the last couple of years. But yeah, now really because of the Bitcoin Startup Lab being very bullish on building on Bitcoin. Before that, we were really a lot more focused in this kind of Ethereum realm. And now building this smart vault protocol called Covault, which is a direct output from our time at the Bitcoin Startup Lab.
Wow, man, that's a really interesting, diverse background going from architecture to fashion, then into startups. But wow, it sounds like a pretty wild journey. And just wanted to ask you a question about Clubhouse. It was interesting. I was listening to the founder of Clubhouse talking about how they're going to try and revive it. You would have seen that original era, and then Spaces taking over. What's going on with Clubhouse? Do you think there's a future for that platform?
I think it had its rise and fall. I'm not sure exactly. Yeah, I think a resurgence would be unlikely. But it was amazing at a certain point in time, and maybe there is some hope. I don't know. I like to be optimistic about things, but I think sometimes when things like have a catastrophic failure, they never like there's no relaunching that. Maybe if they
Okay.
called it something else, maybe a brand new brand. Maybe. I mean, there
Yeah,
was a sweet spot. It filled the sweet spot and rose to even. I remember at one point they were getting like $1 billion offers that they turned down. That's gotta hurt.
I know, and that guy's still holding on and saying he's going to come back, which is pretty interesting. But yeah, thank you for sharing, man. I mean, these guys here in the chat, they know me, so I won't go on too much. But I'll just quickly introduce myself, man. So my name is Mark. I'm from over here in New Zealand. My background early on after finishing high school, I did high school in Australia and then moved back to New Zealand. I was a professional cricket player and then also did my qualification as a multimedia. So from around 2000 right through through the 2000s and 10s, did a lot of web design, website building with WordPress and a lot of multimedia, 2D and 3D and stuff like that. But I joined the military originally part time around 2000. I think it was 2003. Served 18 years in the New Zealand Army. Did one full time term, but most of it was part time. But I've been very entrepreneurial. Quite early on. Did a lot of network marketing, but then got properly entrepreneurial after leaving the military and established New Zealand's #1 fitness boot camp franchise. I ran that franchise and grew about, I think it was about 20 odd locations and heaps of trainers. But yeah, I pivoted over to Web3 around the COVID time when that business was just struggling due to the really tight restrictions we had here in New Zealand, and started the first veteran/first responder community in the space. And that's, like the crew here where come from veterans, first responders, and the supporters of those communities. But we've got a couple of sold out projects. We've also got a Bitcoin mining project, but we're now deep diving ourselves into runes and ordinals. Initially, as like getting to know the lay of the land and speaking to people like yourself who are very knowledgeable. But we do have the intent to, eventually launch our own Bitcoin project, which we've put into pre-sale, but we're not here to talk about that and that. We're actually, I'm very much here to pick your brains because you've been there, done that around Bitcoin. But Vince, maybe I'm not sure if you want to give a quick intro.
Glassy had me at music, because that's my background as well. So, um, yeah, just a brief coming into the space. I've been in here for a little over 3.5 years in the crypto space, and I just love learning a ton, and it's been quite a growth process. But yeah, this continued evolution of what Glassy was talking about, just the educational component alone, I think, kind of speaks volumes because people here where I work, they know what I do, but many of them really still have absolutely no idea of what blockchain is and what's being built on the back end. And I think it's tough sometimes to kind of remember because we're in this every day and constantly learning. And that's that next evolution piece of continuing our education, especially with these new tech building on Bitcoin now. It's opened up a whole new avenue, another ecosystem that Bitcoin didn't really have access to. So I think, us as being entrepreneurial, investment kind of in minded individuals, constantly learning to, constantly wanting to learn and expand and see where the market goes and see where that value is being built. That has us really intrigued with what Bitcoin is doing, and all these different protocols being built on it right now, and how it's quickly evolving, right, and where it's going to take us. But circling back to that education component, that everybody has to start somewhere in this space, and to get the masses to understand what the power of what blockchain is going to be able to do, and how they can build some wealth strategies, with the Bitcoin, continue to support the proof of work network kind of aspect of it. I think that's huge, and that's what has us intrigued with what Bitcoin is doing and the power that it has to really create some opportunity for us to make a difference in where we feel there's opportunity for us, especially within the veteran aspect of it, to really continue to grow and make a difference in the real world.
Absolutely. It's an important thing. We took it. I mean, sometimes things just align. I'll say it like that. Sometimes things just align nicely, and between the alignment of the context of, in that case, a Clubhouse. In this case, we're on Twitter, whatever, X. It's a little bit little different, a little more difficult. But on Clubhouse, it was perfect because there were people that were so hungry for knowledge, and there were also other people that were so hungry for acknowledgement. And it was this perfect symbiotic relationship where people could ask questions and endlessly have someone very eagerly answering that question, just so specific, like wanting to share that knowledge, and then sharing the knowledge, receiving acknowledgement, because we have always had a crowd of people. Like even here, it's beautiful. We have a little nice turnout. In Clubhouse, we would have sometimes hundreds on in a regular basis. We would have hundreds of people, and one of our MOs is that we would hand a mic to everyone. Everyone got an invite to be on stage. So we would literally have sometimes hundreds of people, all with the ability to unmic at any given moment. And this was just like an open learning classroom environment. No one knew each other. No one knew what a PFP was. This was like even before BAYC. They were like CryptoPunks, so like a few of the OGs that were like helping teach the new like creators and generators coming into the space. But they had the ability to ask questions. People got acknowledged for being able to answer questions well, which then led to having social proof and momentum that helped people launch DAOs, launch other kinds of projects, and it was like this fertile rainforest of projects. And because people had made the right moves together, this is what an ENS is. Get your .eth. This is what a gas fee is. This is where you buy ETH. Like just like walking people through all these steps. And then lo and behold, the ENS drop came. It was like, damn, at $5,000 for everyone. Like we had taught so many people about ENS, like probably that alone maybe made people $1 million collectively. But anyway, yeah, it was just those kind of circumstances. And I think all in all, there's not a lot of communities like that. And since the meltdown of Clubhouse as a whole, I just assume, like, the things that you just project on the world, like you think that's how everyone else does it. But then examining all these other communities, different NFT communities, different kind of situations, it's been impossible to recreate that, or find it. And then you kind of look back and see how special those moments of alignment were.
Yeah, do you think it was just kind of the perfect storm? You have COVID shut down, and
Yep.
that particular platform just lended itself, to that space at that particular point in time. and
Yep.
and since the world is now opened back up, and other companies, like right now we're on X having this conversation and seeing the power that Clubhouse had to do that. Obviously, you're going to see other people want to take a market share or build something similar to that, or give some type of platform that, as Clubhouse maybe is the first platform to do it. It doesn't always mean it's going to be the one that lasts or it is the best, because people want to build and make things a little better, or give it some kind of different twist, that allows it to have some other extra, shimmer to it or something like that. That like you said, that time is probably maybe past. It's gone. It had its moment. Now these other platforms, or there's other avenues that people are discovering in order to do some similar things, and Clubhouse just won't ever be the same.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, it was the perfect storm. But it was weird because I think that some of the things that changed, that now the lightning's not in the bottle anymore. I don't even necessarily think it was something so drastic like the pandemic. Like I think that was certainly part of it at the time. Certainly the rise of NFTs as a whole, like that was like just such a huge like thunder of attention. The Beeple sale kind of kicked off the whole thing. All of a sudden, all this energy's over here, like, oh my goodness, digital art is real. Like,
Hmm.
meanwhile, people had been digital artists for 30 years. Like other people have been working with AI for 30 plus years. We're like, oh, finally, it's validated. Like, you could be a digital artist and like have a life that was provided for in that way. And the creator economy had a different layer of economic tools laid on top of it, and it was crazy. It was a crazy boom. And
I think too, Glassy. I think you also had a different audience then, because people had, if they weren't working, they had a lot more time to be able to connect on that platform and be in part of those spaces and learn some of that education, which lended itself, I think, probably to that growth where, the world has changed now. It's opened back up. People are now back to work. They're now busy with their lives, that their attention has to be spent in specific areas, right, where they feel like they're going to get the most value for that time being spent, I think.
I would say the difference between what was happening then and what is happening now could be summed up in one word: algorithm. Algorithm. Yeah,
Yeah.
because every word was being listened to. It's a recording thing, right? Suddenly it's like, oh, especially in the early days, this is before Spaces. There was no Twitter Spaces. There was really, at the earliest stage, I don't think no, there wasn't even a DM feature. All there was the ability to find other people and have conversations with them in live audio. And out of
Yeah.
that restriction, there was somehow some like master puppet show that was going on, that if you were talking about certain subject matter, you would just get handed off people that you never knew before but had the answers to what you were talking about. They would be the other side of the equation. It was like this master, it was like a symphony of collective intelligence. Because
Mm,
if you wanted to know more about DAOs, suddenly someone's finding your room. You want to know
right.
more about DAOs and they want to teach more about DAOs. You want to know more about tokens and they want to teach about tokens. It was like this perfect complement that just happened. This like perfect little sweet point of a balance between the discovery and the delivery of this information.
Yeah.
And
And
now it's like it's hard. I feel like even me, like I'll spend more time trying to find even one space, much less a space where a place where I would want to spend 10 hours, because that 10, like you said, it would be the best place I could ever spend 10 hours because it's going to turn into potentially life-changing money.
yeah. Yeah.
And
And
it was for people. Like people were
you
getting contracts, people were getting hired, like people were launching their careers, people were launching $1 million plus NFT collections. It was
yeah,
yeah, it was
that's
like
probably
it was a bizarre time.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest thing that people saw the value in, was maybe the algorithms they had behind there that allowed people to connect in mass like that, right? So, beautiful thing. Now you had talked earlier about Ethereum, right? And we're seeing, some of these I think some of the devs in the market share moving from Ethereum over to Bitcoin. And I think that that's going to lead to a lot of this development on Bitcoin. And I know we're still really early to this whole ecosystem that's opening up on Bitcoin. But Mark, I'm not sure where you kind of wanted to go to next and kind of lead to that. But I kind of wanted to segue into how this is building and this Ethereum ecosystem kind of affecting what Bitcoin is doing. If that's where you want to go with that, Mark.
Yeah, that is where I was wanting to go. It's actually very interesting seeing that, listening to you guys. You get quite nostalgic, thinking back to 2021 and what was happening then. And it's kind of interesting because we've sort of come full term, launched projects, sold projects, done the whole collab thing, but it's very cool. I feel very excited because now we're immersing ourselves within this, I guess, what is somewhat new relative to a Bitcoin community, and it's a lot of the same. And it's exciting because the technology is very different. And I think that's the thing that's exciting, is the challenge of going out and learning how, ordinals and runes works. And that's really what I'd like to get into next with Glassy. So yeah, let's crack into that. So I just want to go through maybe a little bit of Ordinals 101 stuff for people in our community or people who are listening who might not understand Ordinals. Would you be able to give I guess, your basic concept of what is the main difference between Ordinals and Ethereum NFTs?
The main difference is that with a ordinal, the entire image or the entire information that is required is all on chain, whereas generally with a Ethereum NFT, it's often that you're pointing towards like an image file that might be stored somewhere else, maybe on IPFS, maybe Arweave, maybe somewhere else.
What
So
are the
you could say
what are
there's
the
other
implications for that? What are the main
differences.
implications for that?
I'll say another fundamental difference. One is sneaky. One is sneaky and not necessarily how Bitcoin was designed. Nowhere in the white paper, actually, in the white paper, it does mention meta protocols. So I take that back. Satoshi actually did accommodate for the fact that for people to do more advanced things, they would have to come up with meta protocols or L2s or entirely other blockchains. Like these are pretty much like you have three options of kind of bringing other layers of programmability. So with Ethereum, they made that with that in mind. They're saying, you know what? We need to make a thing for smart contracts. Like we need to build a blockchain that is going to have a programmatic element to it. And that was one of the driving factors in creating Ethereum right from the onset. From looking at Bitcoin and saying, that's great, that's the direction. Decentralization is how we need to go. Blockchains are the way we need to go. But you know what? We need a blockchain with more programmability. So they built Solidity. They created that as a language. They created this concept of smart contracts that are stored within the blockchain. So with Ethereum, there's so much brain power, so much energy that have gone into it. Something I think like 90% of all of the decentralized apps and all of the smart contracts that have ever been written have been created for Ethereum virtual machine. So there's this just a huge wealth of information and development that has gone into it so far on Ethereum, whereas on Bitcoin, it's been really limited because it was designed, you could say, with a different purpose, a different driver, or a different higher, yeah, you could just say a different purpose was driving the car. And so they were limiting things like programmability, and they were valuing things like decentralization um, and being able to keep this impeccable record of who has what in these digital assets. So I say it was sneaky because it was one person came up with this. He used to be a core developer for Bitcoin. He left being a core developer, and he's you could say he's a bit of a rogue, and you could say like maybe in a lot of ways that embodies the spirit of Bitcoin in general. Like you know what, it's freedom. We have a free way of just like no intermediary. We can just publish these things. And he created this protocol, this ordinals protocol that uses sats and uses essentially a way to add additional data to individual sats as a way to, in a very sneaky but in a very elegant way, to create essentially the equivalent of an NFT, to create a way where you could store an image file or any number of other innovative uses. And from that base layer, base understanding, and he's not necessarily the very first person. I think Counterparty was among the first. Heard a great space with them recently. But just to say, Ordinals, it caught fire. It was like just something about the perfect timing. The need was there, the energy was there. A bunch of rogues were ready to take that energy and run with it and start building communities. And these communities, they faced a lot of opposition. The earliest stages, they faced a lot of opposition from the laser-eyed maxis. They're like, "Oh, don't write this other stuff on the chain. You're blocking up the chain. You're congesting the chain. You're wrecking the chain. Our fees are going to go too high." And if I had to be totally honest, I was kind of on that camp. I'm like, can we just keep the NFTs over here? Also, I bought, if you look at my wallet, go check, the proof is there. One beautiful thing about the blockchain, check out glassy.eth. And you can check, and I can tell you what it feels like to buy 700 NFTs that don't necessarily go in the direction you want them to go in. So then I was also feeling like, really, we're going to do this again over on Bitcoin? Like, doesn't Bitcoin have a bigger purpose than this? But no, after a while, I was like, realized that the party was over on Bitcoin. It wasn't just about creating some monkey pictures or pixel art or whatever it is. Okay, that's cool. We like PFPs. We like that point where it touches on our identity. It touches on an opportunity for the investment to go up, for it to go up wildly and without quote unquote intermediaries, at least not the ones that we're used to, not the usual players, not the usual intermediaries that kind of extract value out of culture and out of exchange or whatever. Okay, so it's different intermediaries, different extractors, definitely at play. It's not perfect, but it's an interesting place. And what it opens up is more than just being able to transact digital images. Okay, digital collectibles, that's cool. We saw what a crazy phase that was and how many lives that touched in the last cycle. But here we have a different opportunity now because it's opening up Bitcoin and innovation for people to start using it in a cool way where they're starting to use it not just for pictures, but to actually start to build some of these DeFi primitives and some of these, what you would say, the builder side of the ecosystem, not just the coins, not just the trading, but the builders to come in and actually build platforms, to build, to innovate, to find different ways of exchanging, of extending the uses and the functions and the features and the functionality and the use cases and the user journeys. And with a simple toolkit like Ordinals, which initially I could also reiterate, like this thing caught fire. In the earliest stages, people were like, I don't know about Ordinals. You know how we are. We're quick to FUD. I don't know. What are you guys doing? But within a year, so many billions. Also, this caught fire in Asia. This is another, like, I think a big cultural phenomenon to point out. So much, you could say, pent up liquidity started pouring into Ordinals because of various cultural reasons. There's not a huge amount of investment opportunities. There's a lot of people that have this currency, they hold Bitcoin, but they don't necessarily have a ton of investment opportunities. So Ordinal started addressing that, and it was fairly shortly thereafter. This other person, Domo, so Casey Rodarmer is the person that created Ordinal theory. Then there's this other person, Domo, that came along, used Ordinal theory and created a fungible token standard and called it BRC20. So all of a sudden, Casey starts seeing these JSON files start popping up in his ordinals. He's like, "Yo, who's messing up my ordinal? Why am I seeing all these JSON files popping up in the mempool? Like, this isn't how I wanted ordinals to be used. What the hell?" But that also caught fire because people really wanted the ability to buy tokens, not just NFT, not the equivalent to NFTs, but what you could say is the equivalent to ERC20s. So like ApeCoin or whatever, Uni, or like all these different various coins that we hold or we've engaged in. So we want that on Bitcoin, and that too, like even just like the top 2 or 3 BRC20s. So the Bitcoin fungible standard caught so much fire that just the first, like the top 3 or 4 coins had billions of dollars, like $4 billion market cap. So we're just seeing so much incredible liquidity that's pouring into this. Casey saw all these JSON files that were these BRC20 files, these BRC things that were coming to existence. So he decided to make another standard called Runes as what he considered to be a better and more elegant solution using UTXOs, which is part of how Bitcoin operates. And in order to create what he would say is a better way to accomplish fungible tokens. And that's what runes are. So runes accomplish a more elegant solution and supposedly a more scalable, just all around cleaner solution. And yet BRC20 has already kind of taken hold. So it's kind of an interesting situation right now. A lot of people are saying that only one will emerge dominant. Other people are saying that there's so much usage and there's so much familiarity that BRC20 will stay. Yeah, so that's kind of where we're at. That's where we're at in the drama.
Nice, man. Hey, just for myself and a few other listeners, could you just go over a few of the technical terms? So mempool, UTXO, and I see now, like within the Runes ordinal space, you see the meta a lot of people asking for taproot addresses. I was wondering if you could just fill us in on what those are.
In 2021, there was an upgrade that was called a taproot upgrade for Bitcoin. And this brought into being some new fundamentals that you could say were the building blocks to empower things like ordinals, things like runes, BRC20, and part of that is this taproot address. And some of the interesting things that a taproot address would do that a normal Bitcoin address might struggle with is being able to identify and isolate a Satoshi or a sat. So a sat is, I believe, it's 100 millionth of a Bitcoin. And so we're just basically saying like pennies on the dollar, something like that. So in a sat, in this tiny fraction of a Bitcoin, there's an opportunity to store some data. And that's essentially the data that we're storing within that sat is the data that would relate specifically to that ordinal. And that means that in a regular Bitcoin wallet, I could accidentally spend that. Does that make sense? Like that's a penny, so that's actually something that I could spend, that one sat. So a taproot address would allow you to identify, separate, isolate, and store that separately so it's not going to accidentally be spent. So imagine you have a node monk and you paid some outrageous amount of money for that, 10, 20, whatever they're at, 30,000 plus, 40, $50,000. That would be such a catastrophe that you say you were trying to buy another ordinal, and while you were trying to purchase that ordinal, if that wasn't in the right wallet and you weren't treating that in the right way and that sat wasn't isolated, that could be spent by accident when you're just trying to pay a gas fee for another purchase or for some other transfer. Does that make sense so far? And I'll go over
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
It's a little confusing. But that's when I was saying, like, it's sneaky. Like, that was part of the sneakiness of it. They were like, oh, wait, in these sats, we can store data.
Yeah, I think because is that allow then people with the taproot then to isolate out these specific sets that have specific maybe characteristics, not only from the information of like say per se an ordinal, but also certain ones that have numerical
Yeah, like
sequences
rare
to them
sats.
that have
The whole
that
rare.
have
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole collector's movement. Some people say it's nonsense. And other people take it extremely seriously, spend huge amount of money, and treat it as an absolutely major collector's item. Things like the first sat that's created out of the block, or something along the lines of the satoshis that were mined by certain historical figures in the building of Bitcoin, or certain sats that were like the very first sat that was produced in after the halving. Like I think someone paid $2 or $3 million for that sat, just to say like some people treat it outrageously seriously.
Wow. but people are superstitious, so to speak, about certain things. They want, we've seen it in the Ethereum, and I'm even guilty of this myself, where it's like, oh, hey, I want number 1441, because of the number sequence of it, right? And it's value that I have attached to it personally, but other people may see that same number as a value to it as well.
Right. Yeah, and it might be
So
especially valuable, like if your favorite number was 7 and it was like 7 sevens in a row. You're like, oh damn, that's super valuable. Other
yeah.
people look at like the number sequence, and it'll be like symmetrical. That's kind of cool, right? It's really nerdy, but like, oh, that's kind of cool. Oh, it's like 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah.
3, 2, 1. So it's got kind of a poetry to it. So I can appreciate
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So the whole rare sats thing is definitely alive and well as a movement and as a collector's like whatever. Other people, like maybe certain technical people, or maybe a little more technical than myself, would say the way Bitcoin works is on essentially destroying and recreating things all the time. So the idea that you could isolate a sat that was made so long ago after all these generations of Bitcoin and say that that's the same sat all these years later, some people would say like it's impossible. I don't know. I'm not technical enough to have that level of the debate, but I've heard that side of it. But I've also seen the tweets of people announcing these outrageous purchases of, yeah, into the millions for even one single of these super collectible sats.
Yeah. Mark, I don't know where you wanted to go to next, but Glassy, I think that this newfound building tech on Bitcoin's protocol, I think that the timing is also kind of a grid timing as we've had the ETFs get approval. I think that this just lends to creating more monetary value for Bitcoin at the end of the day across the entire ecosystem, with the demand from ETFs and then the actual additional building that's going on top of it. I think for those of us that are in crypto as a whole economy and not just in silos of it, but overall, we want to see that value come onto the blockchain, because we know that Bitcoin drives the rest of the market too, right? So that's going to just bring on new people into the entire space, whether it's through Bitcoin itself, whether it's through other altcoins, but seeing the value that's being built on this, and tying it back into that educational component, as people are now starting to take more notice of blockchain because of ETFs, and that lending some of that credibility to the entire space. And not only that, that driving the regulatory aspect of it as well, right? We know that there needs to be regulation, and defining some things in the space. So I think that this is just, I think we just happen to be here at that perfect time in the space, experiencing it, where we're getting this now adoption, right, and this regulation that's really going to start changing over the entire system of what we do. And most people, you know though, for those of us who are plugged in, it's exciting for us because we've been through this, through the bear market, seeing this now transition out of it. But for a lot of people, they still have absolutely no idea. They don't. I don't even think they understand what's going to finally hit them when all this regulation comes in, and they start seeing Bitcoin potentially see absolutely astronomical new all-time highs potentially.
Yeah, it's a crazy time. It's a crazy time to be alive, even just to witness it. And it's especially crazy to see the opportunity, or like recognize the opportunity and the timing. And a great time to be a builder, and a great time to be a builder that has lessons learned in other blockchains and other things that have happened. I think that arms us so much to be able to make good decisions in what to build and how to really serve communities, serve global communities, or specific niche. It doesn't really have to be global, could be global. But I think that's one of the major advantages that Bitcoin brings us, is maybe in some ways there's regulation, or there's restriction or friction, or all kinds of number of things that really don't come down to the people's interest, but simply there's like barriers between cultures. And I think it's incredible to have a opportunity to make transactions to make exchanges, to create new markets, even to create new markets that haven't been around yet, but could now be possible because of these new tools. And because of that, it's like, imagine like if there was no railroad and you could be the one to build the railroad, and then how many people would benefit after that, or to be the one to like lay down the whatever it is, key infrastructure, key
Sure.
utilities that can benefit so many other builders and so many other communities.
Man, I'm frothing just listening to you. Yeah, because it very much aligns with what we're doing of, trying to onboard, veterans, first responders, and just allowing that community to benefit from blockchain and everything that's going on. I do want to get onto a couple more topics that I have planned within this. So we're very heavily into crypto mining. We mine Bitcoin, Doge, Litecoin, Cardano as part of our utility, and we're an investor club, and I guess you call us an alpha group. I would really like to, because you have a project and you have an interest in real world assets, I'm very keen to hear about your project. What is the roadmap? And just give us a bit of a background about what you're doing specifically, and then the final topic I'd like to cover is just the the accelerator that you went through to launch that project.
Okay, great. Yeah, happy to cover those topics. So we went through. Everyone knows what a multi-sig is, probably. Most people do. Multi-sig is a wallet that has multiple signers. Certainly great for investment DAOs or investment groups or DAOs in general. You have a group of people, that could be a family, that could be partners, that could be a company, that could be certainly a much larger investment group, but people that want to share a treasury and have certain signers that are responsible, or have everyone as a signer and have to vote, be able to put up proposals, those kind of things. So like a Gnosis Safe, you could say it like that, taking the inspiration from that kind of a product, but building it on Bitcoin. And that is the basis of what we're creating. And as we went deeper and deeper into kind of building this toolkit, we realized there's so many things that are unlocked by this base level smart vault that we decided to actually build a full blown smart vault protocol that will be able to essentially unlock a toolkit for people to build two-sided markets and to be able to build structured finance in the way of building vaults that can hold intellectual property, for example. And this is one of our best kind of our best lead examples of what is some of one of the projects that we'll be building on our protocol. They're building an intellectual property marketplace that will allow patrons to buy future earnings of baskets of intellectual properties. So vaults will be created. Those vaults will hold whatever, a few dozen different properties that might relate to song masters, that might relate to earnings from films or any number of things. And so from the creator side, they're able to raise this capital and kind of like engage in all the benefits of essentially a futures market. And from the investor side, they're able to get exposure to an asset class that generally moves counter the whole rest of the market. So Bitcoin might take a dive, Fed releases rate adjustments, things, markets go down. Well, royalties continue to come in, disbursements continue to happen, and they happen directly through the vaults. So the vault positions give people an opportunity to buy into the vaults, and are also the exact token that give people governance rights and helps calculate for their disbursements for the term of the vault. And this is Covault. This is the project Covault. So this is a project that is the protocol that we're building, Covault protocol, and then that platform specifically empowering creators to connect with patrons is the first project that building on Covault protocol is called Futurist.
That's sick. I know Vince will be listening to that with delight, being a being a musician who actually has music out there in the market. You'd be pretty interested in that. Huge possibilities there, right, for across all real world assets. on the development side, what is, obviously you've got smart contracts there with Ethereum, but with Bitcoin, you're seeing these, as you mentioned, different meta protocols coming together. Would you consider this a meta protocol, or are you utilizing other
No,
meta
this isn't
protocols to
initially.
solve this problem?
Yeah, it's a great question. Initially, we were setting out to create a new one, and then I don't know, through a series of events and pivots, just different points of awareness, realizing that this is just something that's needed. And so we're building it as a protocol, but it's not necessarily like a meta protocol where now, actually, I mean, it's in a way that's kind of hard to say. Yeah, we're right on the brink. We're essentially like a infrastructure that allows people to build two-sided markets using smart vaults as the thing that they're transmitting. So it's very similar to a meta protocol, but we're not creating the script for a multi-sig. That is something that's embedded and was essentially released as part of this Taproot upgrade that happened in 21. So I wouldn't call us a meta protocol because we haven't really created a new protocol that we're introducing, so much as we are a builder's toolkit to create these real world asset two-sided markets.
Nice. No, thank you for that. It's cool, and it's obviously needed within that Bitcoin space. I think the thing that excites me the most about Bitcoin and building here is this mass adoption is, I guess, right on the cusp already with Bitcoin. So there's no having to convince the market about the base token. But you're a graduate of the Bitcoin Startup Lab. We have an application and development with our exec team for the community. What was your experience there with the Bitcoin Startup Lab? What was the process, and what was the experience like of working with those guys?
It was really good. It was really good. It was a very, it was a competitive to get in, and it was a very time-consuming program. So it required a lot of time, energy, commitment, brain power. And about 3 weeks into the program, I lost my co-founder. He just disappeared, MIA. And so I was in a bit of a scramble to find a co-founder and to just solidify the kind of builder side of the team to be able to qualify and meet all the requirements along the process to actually be in line to be allowed to pitch, to like essentially graduate and get to the point of pitching at demo day. So they keep the bar really high, which I love. I thought was great, but I was also like, I'm grown. I have kids, so it's funny to be in a circumstance where you feel nervous. Like I don't generally ever feel nervous, so but nervous in the best way. Nervous because you want to perform, because you want to shine, because you don't want to be the one to drop the ball when there's a ton of investors and everyone's like seamlessly pitching. So they did a really good job covering in those 3 months, first of all, bringing in a huge amount of people that are building in the space. It was obvious, like, wow, these guys are like a hub and a spoke. Like there's like in the middle, like a hub in the wheel. There are spokes that are connected all throughout the space, from L2s to people building different types of scaling solutions to building DLC type of infrastructure. DLC is a discrete log contract, which is maybe like the simplest version of a smart contract. So they don't really have smart contracts, but they do have DLCs on Bitcoin, which allow for like essentially one if then kind of computation. And if you string them together, that is one way to kind of create some programmability. Some people have gone that route, so they brought some infrastructure into that regard. They brought investors in. Their whole thesis is to build an investment-ready startup in record time. And I would say they do exactly that. They focus on the key points to actually get you ready and polished. And I would say I'm a serial entrepreneur but I always bootstrapped, and I always had this thought that you had to get to a point from bootstrapping up until like raising multiple millions of dollars with perfect books in order to then go to VCs, which is actually true. And I think maybe from the older school kind of like way it was done. So it was great personally to get the direct insight for here is the exact kind of surgical methodology for what you need to do to raise in the pre-seed stage. So that was great. Then they're well connected and they keep the bar high. So if you actually follow their methodology, you have a really high chance of at least getting into a place of getting funded. Certainly in a place where you could potentially connect with other founders or co-founders or strategic partners. Certainly in a place where you could have a whole host of people that you could invite into being board members or like advisors or these kind of things. They also went through several weeks of like talking about tokenomics. They probably could have done that like you could take a whole probably 3-month program just to get a handle on your tokenomics. But I would say all in all, and then it culminated with an event that I went to at ETH Denver that they put together. So then I was able to meet a bunch of other people in the cohort. That was really great. And also meet a bunch of investors, one of which ended up being our first investor into our company. So I would say all around, I couldn't say enough good things about it. And kind of going through a little bit of a pivot because initially we were like, oh, we're the Smart Vault. We're going to be a Smart Vault platform. And then we evolved to think, hey, we're going to reposition ourselves more as a Smart Vault protocol for other builders to build on top of. And from that, we'll be pitching again in their next pitch day. So yeah, they've been really supportive. Great. Albert Lang is the CEO, and it's been really good to have a mentor, especially moving into a new subject matter. And you were talking about learning. That was great in the last cycle, learning, hey, what is an NFT? What are all those unique and innovative ways you can apply that thinking and that technology? And with Bitcoin, it's been equally interesting. Like here is a whole other toolkit. They don't have smart contracts. They don't just have a smart contract execution layer. This isn't something that's just embedded and designed into the VM. People are working towards that, and there's a lot of innovators that are looking to kind of crack that. But we're in such a wonderful experimentation phase. Like, what a perfect time to actually redirect that energy. And I think you're exactly right. The VC money's coming in, the energy and builders are coming in, and there's plenty of people that are building in a way to figure out how do we actually leverage and unite and integrate so that all these incredible things that have been built already on Ethereum, we can start leveraging in one way or another into the Bitcoin ecosystem. And I think the real force behind Bitcoin, one of the biggest forces, is that there's so much liquidity that's just sitting there ready to be dispatched into new projects, protocols, trading, meta protocols, whatever it might be. Just a stupefying number. And even that is so small when you start looking at like bigger finance and institutional finance and like you look behind the curtain a few more layers and you realize how much money there really is circulating in the economy. Even how much money in Bitcoin right now is tiny, but the amount that's been unlocked on Bitcoin is even a tinier little fraction of a fingernail. So I think just the amount of liquidity and energy of what it looks like at some fraction of $1 trillion, these projects and protocols could potentially start outpacing nations. Like it's a really serious playground. I would put it like that. And a really interesting one, it being decentralized and all this brain energy starting to pour into it. And then the VC money starting to pour into it. And then new meta protocols unleashing new energy behind like this gambling energy, which is essentially the most pervasive thing that drives everything. So now there's fungible standards. So now it's like the casino is open. That's when everyone was talking about when even Casey would say like I'm releasing runes because we deserve to have a casino open on Bitcoin and like native meme tokens and these kind of things. And they're taking root and they're just all a big experiment. But when you experiment in deeper waters with more decentralization and more liquidity, I think a lot of interesting things are going to be happening.
Man, fuck, that was a crazy epic summary. So you're still very much along the journey of raising for your project and building it out, and I guess bringing on board
Exactly.
clients. Okay.
Yep.
Shit, sounds quite thorough. Hey, awesome. That was yeah. I like your answers because they're very, very in depth. Maybe the final thing we could go over, unless anybody else wants to come up and ask any specific questions, feel free to request to come up. Have a bit of time, but I'd like to talk about the market specifically with runes and ordinals. Obviously, I see your PFP there as a node monkey, but what are the specific runes and ordinals? Given that we are in, it looks like we're in a bit of a dip, bit of a lull. What are the ones that you're looking at to say that they're going to have a really bright future?
You know, there is a ongoing saying that like there's actually a marketing term behind this. It's like if it's shocking, the news have been using this forever, right? As long as there's been the news, they use this kind of psychology. Like if something is like shocking or like shockingly bad, somehow it gets more traction because it's like stuck in your head. So there was something about the art for the Bitcoin puppets that was just so shockingly horrendous that it got a lot of mind share, and and it rose crazy, and they got a crazy strong community, and like they have a ridiculous vibe, and it's like this counterculture thing of like the worst art you could imagine. But it's like an aesthetic, and it was like almost an aesthetic of defiance, so like against the polishedness. It's like almost like conceptually, like you almost have to applaud it. Anyway, out of the dip and communities that I think are outrageous, but somehow I think worth collecting and stable, and I think I can see them going up. I would imagine that one. That's like on one end of the spectrum, Bitcoin puppets. On the other end of the spectrum, there are things like the Pizza Ninjas. Trevor was one of the mentors that came into the Bitcoin Startup Lab. He did like 2 or 3 classes. I was sold right there. I was like, oh my god, this what a great amount of information and insight he was able to give. He's at the helm of the Bitcoin Pizza Ninjas, and they're doing interesting things. What is the other one? Going more towards like a historical level, the Bitcoin Frogs. So if we're talking about like, oh, we got to pack our bags, we're going to spend some money, we're going to pack our bags. I think those three would be right at the top of my list. I think also toward the top of my list would be things like, what are they? The the Wizards of Ord. The Wizards of Ord. I know that the person behind that has been in the community for a long time, well respected, and just pretty nicely well seated group. And I think like, why would you want to buy these things? The interesting thing about ordinals that I think was like maybe culture specific. Not that, I mean, airdrops happen all over, but the culture around airdrops for Bitcoin projects and the culture around free mints around Bitcoin projects hits entirely different than it would on other chains, or than I've seen it like executed, and just the culture around it. It's completely different on Bitcoin. So a lot of why you want to hold some of these assets isn't necessarily because the asset is going to climb in value, which obviously you hope that it does, right? You hope that you don't have 735 that are just like not even worth selling, not even worth the gas to sell, right? You hope that doesn't happen. But part of the real benefit of holding these things is because, and I'm not going to say some utility, I'm not going down that road. The benefit of holding them is you get airdrops. You get airdrops of other projects. So then you can decide to sell those or hold those, which then might bring to airdrops. So, like, by positioning and timing with the purchase of these certain ordinals communities, opens the gate to future airdrops, which can open the gate to being well positioned with these certain meme tokens, runes, or other things that have either significant historical value, and you want to just hold on to it as a collector. And if it goes to zero, who cares? We saw the other stuff go to zero. We're making some other plays to make money, and we're holding other things that if they go to zero, we don't care. Yeah, maybe that kind of mentality. But I think it's incredible that runes came into being not only in our lifetime, but like whatever it was, like a month ago or 6 weeks ago. The halving, this thing came into being. We're gonna watch it grow. We watched what happened to ordinals. Like we watched it go from mocked and faded to billions of dollars and cross-cultural connection between the East and the West. Like maybe few things I've witnessed. And so I think we can expect this kind of growth to hit over this next year for runes, and maybe even bigger, because we're about to hit this, what seems like everyone's rattling this nice upswing for the bull market as a whole. So who knows? Who knows how much more we might get beat up, because we just, when we thought that was going to happen, right? The next thing you know, BAYC gets hit 25% or whatever it is. Like, so yeah, instability and volatility rules the day. But just the same, the toolkit is great to build on, and being positioned in things like the first rune that ever got etched, the second rune, right? The ninth rune. I think there's something beautiful and historical about that from a collector's standpoint. And if you hold an exit at the right time, could be potentially life-changing money. So I think for all of those reasons, it's just an exciting time. And if anything, also exciting because of anyone that just has been in the space and got beat up for your entire bear market. Like, that was brutal. For other people that maybe took profits at the right time, not such a big deal. Okay, we're gonna dip down, we're gonna accumulate, no big deal. But for plenty of other people that weren't maybe well positioned and properly, planning these things out. Also, I think a lot of it too is aware of how narratives work, cycle to cycle. Say that was something that I was ignorant to, and would have saved me a tremendous amount of time, energy, aggravation, certainly money, certainly a ton of ETH that was just really wasted because I didn't know that narratives change cycle to cycle. They generally don't carry over. I didn't know that. I also didn't know that by having two different types of volatile assets that were connected together, that generally creates too much volatility, and they usually one tanks the other. I didn't know that. ApeCoin and BAYC being a perfect example of that. But yeah, anyway, those are my closing thoughts.
Awesome, man. I'll hand over to Vince. Have you got anything else you wanted to add, Vince, or ask? We're getting ready to wrap up the space.
No, I think Glassy brought up a couple points that I almost think of this vault thing that you were discussing, almost kind of in the sense of somewhat like a mutual fund, with this basket of assets that can be pulled together and pay out dividends essentially, right? If somebody kind of wanted to give it a traditional framework, right, so to speak. So I find that very interesting because I feel like what you were just talking about with cycle narratives, and this cycle seeing a lot with RWAs, real world assets, being tied in on these things, where we've seen it on Ethereum, not only like what we're doing with, like, having miners tied into our Ethereum NFTs, where there's real assets that are driving value to them, right? And then you're seeing now an uptick of real estate, on various blockchains being fragmented, and so people can now get into real estate without having to take a major hit and putting out 50, 100 to 500K on a piece of property. They're now able to get access to some of these things and start building portfolios on that. I think this narrative is seeing it now trickle over into what can be built on Bitcoin, and unlocking, like what you said, a lot of this liquidity that's been sitting there, that people don't want to part with their Bitcoin, but they want to be able to put it now into other assets or other forms of it, where they can continue to derive and create more value for themselves, right? Um, I think that's probably going to be another huge aspect of it, where people are now going to bring this real world asset narrative to Bitcoin. But how are they going to do it? What's it going to look like? I know what it looks like for us in our particular spectrum, and I don't see many other projects. I've seen one other ordinal project that's basically talking about Bitcoin mining and driving that value to it. But I think it's still so new that it's like the wild wild west. What can we dream up and then build for on the Bitcoin, based on the protocols that are available at this particular point in time, and where that might go next, right? Because you're talking about BRCs and then kind of runes coming along, and we've seen it in Ethereum with the development of smart contracts and what they can do. um, it'll be interesting to see as these developers start going crazy with Bitcoin, what that next evolution of Bitcoin might be. Is, we think, runes might be that for now, but what is some absolutely brain guy nerd going to develop on with Bitcoin that allows it to use a limited protocol, but then open up another layer that's on top of that that allows some other smart contract functionality that can only be unlocked by certain, BRC 20 aspect. Who knows? I mean, it's I'm kind of frothing at the possibilities, even though I may not intellectually be able to develop them, but just knowing that there's this new frontier of possibilities, is kind of exciting because of what it means for the market and what it means for us as entrepreneurs to kind of say, there's smart people behind this that are developing this, but what can we as entrepreneurs, maybe not understanding, the technical aspects as deep as a developer, but be able to build businesses on top of this new protocols and these new avenues for us, right?
Absolutely. And there's always, no matter how far the technology goes, and no matter how powerful the technology is, and no matter how great the innovations are, there's the other side, which still might be at least half, maybe more, maybe 80%, which is the human side, like the human connection side, the people that actually know each other, that actually trust each other, actually look out for each other, actually build solidarity and collective intelligence. So there's some guidance and there's some awareness for what plays to make. There's life changing opportunity in front of us now that is in front of us for the like blatantly for the next 6 to 12 to 18 months or so. And the more people that are aware of that and that can make moves collectively will see life changing money. It's like, not to like over sell the money aspect. There's a lot of lessons learned, a lot of things that like I think maybe also worth underscoring, like just the lessons that we're learning in terms of who we're becoming collectively, individually. But part of the sovereignty is the awareness of how much money there really is in the world, which I think a lot of people don't have a clear like depth of reading on, or how much is immediately at their disposal. And not just to say like get rich quick and YOLO money towards like Solana addresses and stuff like that. But just to say, like, really lock in and find projects that you like and projects and communities that you want to build and support in. And that there really is opportunities here that don't exist in most of the world and in most sectors and industries, whether it be as a builder, whether it be as a community builder, whether it be to learn a code or learn how to do Solidity or whatever it might be, or use AI to build smart contracts or use no code solutions to build the things that you want to build, right? We're in such a beautiful time. Like, you don't necessarily need to be a hardcore developer to do things like have a collection or mint art or have an interesting idea or participate in a meaningful way in a real community of people that actually look out for each other. Or maybe they don't look out for each other. Maybe they're just like so superficially connected because they have the same PFP, but that's enough to just create some commonality that brings benefit to that community. It might even be that. But if they get to that higher stage of actually solidarity, actually looking out for each other, it's just incredible what opens up on a prosperity level, on an economic level, as far as collective success. There's so much to be generated there. And so, whether it be the tools or whatever it is, it's really the people at the end of the day, like how we find each other and how we communicate and build stronger communities and ways of like that inter-community growth. I would say that those are like the two critical areas.
Yeah, I think that's been a big driving force for us, that the liquidity is out there, building on it to equate to real world change, especially for us with veterans and first responders, and then be able to put that into action, right? And be able to make a difference, in people's lives, by unlocking some of that liquidity and building something that we feel is, meaningful for us at Dogface, has been an integral part of what's pulled us all together. But I did want to say thank you very much, Glassy. I appreciate your time today. It's been a great conversation. I would love to have you back again, or connect with you on another space to see what this conversation is like, in several weeks of how you've been able to progress and your aspect of your business and what you're building and where the whole ecosystem is going as a whole.
Sounds good. Happy to come by anytime.
Thank you. I'll
Yeah,
pass it back
beautiful
over
conversation.
to Mark if there's any final things that you want to. But thank you, Mark. I appreciate you hosting this today, and appreciate you again, Glassy, for coming on and speaking with us. Super appreciate it as we all look to learn.
Yeah, no, I'll just wrap it again. And yeah, just reiterate what you're saying. Thank you very much, Glassy, for your time and yeah, giving us the ability to learn from, your knowledge of getting your project going. Appreciate it, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invite. Always nice to come across another community of people that actually care about each other. At least have some level of doesn't have to be the overwhelming thing. We're not all gonna hug a tree all day long. I get it, but just a little bit of solidarity goes a long way. And I swear it really does turn into the economic equivalent, like 1,000x than you roaming around trying to do the right thing, know when to trade, know when to exit, know what tools are, how to leverage V2 of the trading tools. These things are important, and it's too much for you to know all alone. Buddying up, right? The buddy system that works well. That was something they teach here in the States. Like when you're a Boy Scout, they're like buddy up, right? You're in the woods. It might be a little dangerous. You might fall in a creek or something. Okay, buddy up. That's gonna get you through. In the city, they would tell you the same thing, probably like buddy up. You're not gonna get like snatched off the subway or something. It definitely is here. Like buddy up, find the right community that actually can help recognize how to make calls, how to make maneuvers, how to DCA in different types of strategy. You're not going to learn it all at once, but if you pace yourself and you stay focused and you do lock in, you're going to make a major difference for yourself. Like you're going to become a different version of yourself. I'll say that. I think a lot of people have already experienced that. People are already well deep into it. So yeah, let's see what we all become over the next 12 months.
Epic, man. I'm excited for it. And yeah, looking forward to having you back and having a chat and then seeing you out in the space as well. I see you out there a fair bit. So yeah, we'll jump up and have a chat with you in some other spaces as well. And thanks everybody for coming along and having a listen.
Awesome. Thanks again for hosting, Mark. Thank you, everybody who joined us today. Appreciate it.